Fiddlers Grove is a collection of buildings, but it began as a dream of Carlton and Geneva Thomas. And they were fair volunteers back in the early 90s. And Carlton had a hobby of taking apart old log cabins that were in danger of getting bulldozed over. So working through the fair, they had selected a couple of buildings that were in threat of being developed. They moved them here as backdrop for the fair. This area that we're sitting in is just a very nice rock knob with a lot of nice trees. So they were trying to find a way to incorporate it into the fair where you had a place where you could have shade, and they just started to put these buildings here. Once they had 5, 6, 7, 8 buildings, they developed the idea that it could serve a bigger purpose of being a place to save Wilson County history, to record that history, and then present it back to the public. So what Fiddlers Grove is now is actually a nonprofit whose mission is to preserve the history of Wilson County and its people. And we do that through the collection of buildings that we've collected, through some of the other artifacts that we've collected, the oral histories, the written histories. And throughout the entire year, we use those to help school kids with their tours. We help families understand their own history here in Wilson County. And one of the coolest things that we get to do is we have all these new folks that have moved in the last decade or so, and they can come to a place like this and they can learn, like, why is this street named this, or where did that family name come from? So Fiddlers Grove is a lot of things to a lot of people, but for the most part, it is a historic interpretive village. We have a collection of over 60 buildings. They range from things going back to the late 1700s. The oldest building that we have provenance on is the Rice Cabin. It goes back to Gladeville in the late 1790s. Then we have buildings that go much more recent, 1900s, 1950s, and everything in between. And then we also have interpretive buildings that go along with those historic structures. We have pavilions for entertainment stages. We've got buildings that we house agricultural events in. We have an FFA building, for instance. We have artisan and craft buildings that are designated specifically for certain heritage crafts. One of the biggest ones that we've got right here next to where we're sitting is the Blacksmiths building. It has 12 different forges in it, and it is the largest collection of blacksmiths that is currently operating in Tennessee. Most of us are volunteers. I'm a volunteer myself. We do have 2 paid personnel that are part of Fiddlers Grove. We've got an event coordinator, and then we have an assistant to the event coordinator. But everybody else here is volunteer staff. There are some groundskeepers that work through the fair and through the county, but for the most part, overwhelmingly, hundreds of volunteers. So Fiddlers Grove during the fair is really the entire month of August. So the fair begins set up on August the 1st. But it's important to note that that is a year-round process. There's a full-time staff in the fair office here on the grounds that are making those contracts happen, that are making everything work. So Fiddlers Grove is part of that process the entire year. But really all the bells and whistles start coming on in August, because that's when all of the additional fair volunteer staff starts to show up. We start to put out all of the pretty bunting. We really put some extra work into our demonstration gardens and our landscaping and our trees, just to get everything ready, because the Wilson County Fair, Tennessee State Fair, regularly draws around 750,000 people. And my estimate would be probably half of those folks at least come through Fiddlers Grove in some form or fashion during the fair. So my guess would be we probably welcome about 400,000 people in the Grove every year during the fair. It's a unique relationship for a place like Fiddlers Grove to have the fair as part of what it does every year. Most places that present history to the public are out of the way. They're somewhere that time is forgotten. There's not Walmart right next door or an apartment complex right next door for the most part. They're places that people don't go to unless they're really interested in that history. Because the Wilson County Fair is the size that it is, and now with the Tennessee State Fair and the focus that's brought from statewide, we're able to present Wilson County history to people in a way, to a populace that would not normally see that. So the two things are so interwoven you can't take them apart. Fiddlers Grove is here because the fair started it, but now the fair relies on Fiddlers Grove to bring that extra thing that no other fair in the country has. You know, when I talked to Randall Clemens about Fiddlers Grove and the fair and the things that we can do during the fair, that's always his focus. His focus is always on how unique that is compared to all the other fairs that they talk to, because nobody has an entire historic village to operate a fair out of. So it's just a really magic thing.